Before we get started on like a formal introduction of Adam Winch, because that's going to be quite interesting, I want to do a little informal thing for him real quick. Um, he's been behind the scenes helping me with these lives, which I absolutely appreciate. And but I want to tell you a little story that ties directly into Adam and why I'm here every Wednesday and why I continue to keep showing up for you every Wednesday. So I've had it on my heart for probably close to a year to do something like this, to do some sort of a podcast or live stream long before I ever met Adam or became an instructor at Defenders USA. But I was absolutely petrified to do anything of the sort and scared to death. And, there's things sometimes that you wish you could do, but you never quite get the courage up to do. Well, that was me. And so I never really, honestly, never really thought I would do it. Like it was always one of those things I wished I would do, but probably will never happen kind of a thing. And maybe a lot of you don't know that I didn't even know who Adam Winch was or what Defenders USA was before April of this year. And that's a whole other story unto itself. You can go back to, I think it was the end of July, one of the first broadcasts I ever did. If you go back to the Defenders Live Facebook group page, it's pinned at the top of the feed, and it's called My Story. And same with Defenders Live YouTube channel. You can look it up there. I don't think it's on the Defenders USA one, but anyway, it's called My Story, and it tells you about how all of this came to be. And that's not what I'm here to tell you about, but after I became an instructor unexpectedly with Defenders this past summer, I mentioned this just like nonchalantly to Adam about the live stream idea, and he enthusiastically encouraged me to do this. But here is how and why I was actually able to jump off this virtual live streaming cliff, and it has been a literal cliff and a deep, wide ocean of great and scary things. So leading up to the classes that I took with him in last April, where I first met him and found out who Defenders USA was or what the company was, I went on his YouTube channel. And because I wanted to check him out, I wanted to see who this guy was, what this company was about, et cetera, et cetera. I'm sure most of you do that too before you go to training classes if it's somebody you're not sure who they are. And what I saw was an extremely talented shooter, but what I loved about the channel was that it was just him being real. Like there was no producing or scripting or any of that stuff. It was just a lot of good information. There was a lot of meat on the bones of what he was saying. I could relate to what he was saying. A lot of it was new information. I was learning a lot, but he would mess up in the middle of a video and just keep on going like it was no big deal, no shame, no fear, no nothing, and even laugh at himself in the process some of the time, and he was just being real. And I think that now more than ever, we need that, especially online. So even though, some people might look down on that, I actually looked at that with awe. And I thought, wow, I could never do that. I could never be that real. And I would have to make sure everything was like perfect before I pressed record, right? I think that's why so many people are so afraid to get on camera, is because what if I mess up while I'm on camera? It's like, it's a real thing. It's a heavy pressure, right? It takes real courage to just be yourself, especially on camera, and care more about the message than how you look delivering the message. The message is more important, and that is what I've learned from Adam through this process. And while Adam can definitely very effectively deliver some incredible messages, I have seen him do it in person and on camera that are incredibly inspiring. But the point is that it came from his heart, and that he does that in everything. Everything just comes from his heart. He speaks from his heart, and you can tell when people do that. And so over time, and he didn't know this, but that inspired me to break out of my perfectionism mold that I still struggle with to this day, but it has held me hostage for years, guys. And I know some of you out there can totally relate to this. I mean, it can be debilitating, and it can be hard to break out of that mold. And it's a constant thing that I struggle with, even today. But I am stepping out and being brave because I was inspired. So here I am now every Wednesday, hoping that in some way I might inspire others to also strip away that perfectionism mold, the doubt, the shame, the fear, whatever it is, in the same way that I was given a true gift of inspiration and courage from a guy named Adam. So there's the informal introduction, and here is the formal introduction. And then I will quit flapping my jaws and let Adam talk. So, Adam's formal introduction. He has taught over 20,000 civilians, military, and law enforcement personnel over the course of his training career. He brings a unique combination of military and police expertise into the classroom and on the range for an engaging, thought provoking learning experience to both solid mental. To build solid mental and physical skills into his students. His teaching style draws students into the learning process with true to life stories, interactive discussion, and hands on exercises, all seasoned with a lot of humor. Hey, guys, if you've ever taken a class from Adam Winch, shout out in the comments if you can relate to some of the humor that he's got. He's got jokes upon jokes, guys. Good jokes for days. He has a good sense of humor. And if you don't have a good sense of humor, you shouldn't take one of his classes. I'm just going to tell you that right out of the gate. But in addition to being an accomplished shooter, Adam is also a dedicated father and husband and friend to many in the firearms community. So without further ado, I'm going to bring Adam into the show. And now, Adam, I'm going to have to try to do the comment section. Welcome to the show formally, Adam. Oh, no, I can't hear you. You muted. You got to unmute your mic.
There we go. Hi.
There you go.
Hi. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me here, Laura. I never thought I'd actually be on here.
Well, there's no time like the present, and I actually think it's been long overdue. So I'm so glad that you're on. So let's start at the beginning, Adam, because not everybody knows who you are. Yes, you're the founder of Defenders USA, but where do we begin with you?
Oh, well, I grew up in West Africa, right? Missionary kid. We moved to Canada when I was, I think, 5. And my parents were going to language school in Quebec. And so for French. And then we moved to Cote d'Ivoire, or the Ivory Coast, West Africa, when I was just turning 6, I believe. And for the most part was there until I was right at 18, then came back to the U.S. almost immediately after graduating what little I had left of high school here in the States. Ran off to a military college. So think VMI, West Point, Citadel, that type of things. And it did that for a bit, truly enjoyed it. And then later realized, I didn't want to be an officer in the Army after all. So moved over to a couple different Christian colleges and almost walked away with a theology degree, a history degree, a French degree, and something else. History, I forget what it is. But later joined the U.S. Army, went in as an MP, so I think military police officer. And I found out within a year I wasn't there to arrest soldiers and sailors and Marines and all that other stuff. Although you freaking Marines, man, you guys like to fight. It's a lot of fun. And you actually think you can fight. So later I decided I want to do that. But moved into some other things, if you know the acronyms, ERT, QRF, SRT, PSD, yada, yada. Truly enjoyed that. Spent some time boots on ground in hot places. And then later police officer in Grand Junction, Colorado for 10 something years, 10 and a half years or so. And while I was there, SWAT team, street crimes unit, training, patrol officer, you name it. So truly enjoyed that, got a lot of experience out of it. And my first real exposure to, not my first real exposure, but the first continuous day-to-day exposure to the true evils of human beings. And, I went into the military thinking I'll get to, kill people and break things and do all the fun stuff that you're supposed to do in the military. And come to find out there was a lot more war on the streets of America than I ever saw overseas. And I'm honestly grateful to be here. Honestly, don't know how I've survived to this point. God's just been gracious, or he has something for me to do somewhere. And somehow he allowed me to survive. And at some point in here, I wanted to do something else, keep adding to it. And I just saw a need for the average civilian, to have the training that I'd had in the military, that I'd had in the police world, And it just felt like I kept running into victims, right? I kept literally helping fill a body bag, it seemed, or showing up on your crime scene, or being there on your worst day when you've been raped or murdered or kidnapped or just something awful. And I just kept thinking, boy, civilians could use some good training. And I saw the training that was in the Grand Junction area. And there was, at the time, there was what in my considered, in my opinion, no good training whatsoever. And if there was, I just didn't know about it, and I tended to know the gun world out there. So at some point, I was griping about it, and a chief kind of just said, "Well, if you're going to gripe about it, why don't you do something about it?" And that kind of grew into a thought process that over time it turned into starting to train civilians. Because honestly, the thought was, if I can catch them before they become the victim of crime, if I can somehow get into them the stuff that I know, then maybe some poor cop doesn't have to show up at their bad day, right? Maybe we can save some kid or some lady from getting raped, or some dude getting murdered, or maybe the victim of a burglary or car theft, because maybe we can teach these things ahead of time. And somehow it snowballed to where ultimately, honestly, the Lord just kind of led me into this and kind of gave me a choice. And well, uh, the beauty of being a full-time gun trainer now is I don't deal with dirt bags on an everyday basis, right? You guys aren't trying to spit your HIV in my mouth, right? You're not throwing your urine at me. I'm not getting in a fight and trying to justify it to my administration, right? I'm not having to deal with administration all the time, who are actually oftentimes more scary than the worst of the bad guys out there. And I truly deal with the best of the best people all the time, because dirt bags don't come to my courses. I think I've kicked out 2 or 3 people in my entire career because they were just sketchy people that showed up and I realized they were bad. In the meantime, I've had tens of thousands of just wonderful, heartfelt people who just want to do better for themselves and those they love.
Mhm.
And somehow they found what I do. And I was fortunate or blessed enough to be able to have a small impact on their lives.
Mike says you're not a gun trainer, you're a people trainer.
Hmm. Well,
Hmm.
Mike is truly a people person, people trainer, gun trainer, all that stuff. And I think that I'm kind of following the big steps with by following him.
So let me get into some questions. So we have, I've got a lot of questions.
Oh,
And
don't do it.
I know. I have a lot of questions, some more lighthearted than others, but I do have them broken down into, personal life experience questions, training questions, and instructor type questions in the instructor world. So, but I want to start off with, you said you grew up in South Africa, right?
West Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, the West Africa, so right next to Ghana.
Okay. So, what about your experience living there has helped you? How did that help you later in life in your law enforcement career or in the military, or did it?
I would, boy, there's a million different lessons there, just a complete million different. I think I came into law enforcement with a completely different view or aspect of most of my American colleagues, right? I'm an American, but because I grew up so differently, right? I didn't understand the reference to the shows that people knew, the movies, the songs of the era, the everything. I had no knowledge of that because I wasn't here in the States and they had no such thing as internet back then. And I came up with a completely different frame of reference. So that was a little bit odd on a cultural level, trying to deal with kind of some of the criminal element, oftentimes even my fellow cops, because there's so much I didn't understand about life. I remember one of my first weeks of FTO program, my field training, as I was a total rookie. I couldn't figure out what a certain plate on a car was. It was blue and gold, and I had no idea. I mean, I'm a newbie cop. I'm kind of new to the area. I didn't know anything about it. And I got in so much trouble because later I got written up because I didn't recognize a blue and gold plate. I didn't realize that was from California. I had no idea. Right. I was still kind of new to Colorado and didn't know plates. So that was kind of one thing. There was so much Americanism that I didn't understand because I didn't grow up in this country. Another thing I think was just honestly a heightened sense of evil, or really, if not evil, danger for a rookie. Um, in Africa, things are a bit more dangerous than here in the States, right? We think that America has a lot of crime problems compared to the rest of the world. And I'll tell you that America is one of the safest places in the world. Yeah, there's a lot of crime out there, but compared to other third world countries, it's absolutely ridiculous. And if it's not the crime, right, you step outside of your door and maybe the mom is going to get you, right? The cobra is going to get you, the whatever is going to get you, or the brigands, right? The bad guys or something. So there's a real heightened sense of alertness over there. And I think that I learned that young as a kid, and that was helpful. And two, I think it just helped for the mere fact that I had a little bit different ideas of culture, right? Not only grew up in the Ivory Coast, but also we spent a year in Canada. We traveled throughout that process, traveled quite a bit, or went through Europe and some other areas, and then later is in the military, saw a good bit of the, say, the Arab countries, different parts of the world there. For a while, my parents went off to Russia after Perestroika, right? The wall came down. So they left Africa and they went to the South Bloc countries. And so I got to go spend probably about 3 or 4 months total over time there. I think something like that, and got to be introduced to more of the Ukrainian culture, the Romanian culture, the Moldovan culture, the Russian culture, and even get snippets of their language too, along with some of the other languages. And just seeing all these different cultures, right? I had all sorts of Lebanese friends, French friends, African friends as kids, and I just saw different mindsets than just an American mindset. And I felt like that really prepared me for some of the stuff that was odd or complex for a newbie cop, if that makes sense.
Wow. Yeah. That's really awesome.
It was
So
also
what
fun when occasionally the court would call you up and be like, "Hey, we need somebody to," or some department would call you up and be like, "Hey, we need a French speaker. We got to talk to this French person. We don't know how to do it." So that was always fun.
That's so cool. So what did you want to be when you were a kid? And did you grow up to be
Uh,
that?
Cowboy, country star, country singer, soldier, police officer, preacher. I
So
don't
it
know,
changed. Is that what you're saying?
Air Force pilot, Navy pilot, gunfighter, computer nerd that was actually very smart instead of what I am, something like that.
So you wanted to do it all, sounds like.
I wanted to do it all. Yeah.
So you wanted adventure. That could be.
Yes, a lot of adventure, right? We grew up
Yeah.
in Africa. There's very little to do besides the homeschooling at the time, right? There was no TV. So between homeschooling and then my mom and dad, they were so smart. They invested in bringing like 5,000 something books over the first time we went over for 3 or 4 years. Or no, the second time. Yeah, the second time I was kind of reading by then. I was in the 12, 13, 15-year stage. And they brought over like 5,000 books. And they were all old books donated by a library in Illinois. And I mean, Dad put these 55-gallon drums, probably like 4 or 6 of these things, ultimately like 5,000 books. And they were all like older English from 1920s all the way back to the 1800s from England and from other countries. And so I spent, out of boredom, if I wasn't playing soccer or doing homeschool, I was reading these books. And I think I went through that second term of, I think we did 4 years. And I think I read all those thousands of books at least once, and I think several other times. And that was really formative because you learned about a lot of the older things, which I think are a lot wiser than some of the newer things. And it was just a brilliant way to come up, and living in a preacher's home and also hearing how well he spoke, but also reading the books, I thought was helpful for later formative years.
And did you at one time say that you thought about becoming a preacher?
Well, I'm a missionary kid, a pastor's kid, right? You got to
Right.
do it. It's like your job. So I ran off to Bible school because I kind of should or something. And, Dad's a preacher, so I got to be a preacher. And at some point in there, God made it very, very clear, you are not called to preach. And as you know, I'm the last person in the world to do that. He said, like, go do military stuff instead. I won't tell you what he told me, but he said, go do this. You're released. And it was the most joyful day of my life to that point. And then I got to start pursuing what I actually wanted to do instead of kind of going down the route. Though my parents had never tried to get me to do it, never did that. I just kind of put a mental expectation upon myself that, well, if Dad does it, and I admire the man so much, and my mom, she's so good at all the stuff she does within the church and missionary field, I want to be like them, right? Because they became my heroes. And I want to be like them. So you kind of felt like, well, they are, I got to do it. I want to be like them. So, and eventually I got a little tiny bit of maturity at some point and decided, finally realized the Lord said, not you, brother, not you.
Well, this is an inside joke, but Yeah. Okay, let's move on a little bit into your training career because you've talked just very briefly. I've heard you talk about how you had a transformation in gun training as you were learning. In your military and law enforcement career, things were kind of one way, and then you went on kind of an exploration of transforming the way that you think about training or the way that you do train. So, could you speak to that?
Yeah, so the military training I had, I thought was excellent, cutting edge. Right, I was lucky enough to be a part of a military police reserve unit that was mostly stacked up full of cops and SWAT cops. So that was really really good. I learned a lot from these guys. Right, besides the MP school, you took all that stuff and flushed it away, and you actually learned from the real cops. Then and got onto the SRT team and stuff like that. So learned a bit there. Then later as a cop, of course, my police training through the academy was really good. And then all the PD training that I went through for years was good, and especially all the SWAT schools I went off to. I think I went to 4 of them. So a lot of good training there. But later I got myself into several different gun situations, and 2 of which were really as a civilian, not on duty as a cop. And I found in at least one of those situations, my training did not fit the gun incident I was in.
Mm,
And in fact, one time when having to fire the gun in defense of life, I'm sitting there going, I've never done this before. Nobody's ever talked to me about this, and I kind of just had to do it on the fly. You just do, right? And then later, as I pondered it and thought about it, just thinking, okay, I'm so grateful my buddy is still here, and what I had to do didn't fit anything I'd ever done before. And that kind of started the process of going, wait a minute, all the training I'm doing, I mean, I'm a cop. And if you know cops, if you're not paying us, probably overtime, it's not at least on duty, you're not giving us ammo, you're not sending us to the training something, if it's actually coming out of our pocket, we won't generally do it. It's very rare that a cop will go out and do it on their own. And that's all I'd ever done for years. So I started taking and squirreling money away, and eventually I sent myself off to gun school, a civilian gun school. I did a lot of research online, talked to a lot of people, and they said, go to this guy. And there was not many choices at the time. So this is the early 2000s, or maybe 2000, somewhere in there. And, uh, and, and so I go in, here I am, a SWAT guy. I'm one of the better shots in our police department. Right. So I go in thinking SWAT dog, right? I got this. I'm going to smoke them all. And within the first 10 minutes, I was so humbled. I was so embarrassed that though I'm considered really good at this, I was one of the worst ones, if not the worst one, in that whole class of both cops and non-cops. And that's when I realized I needed a lot of training, and I started getting rid slowly but surely and almost angrily getting rid of so much of the dogma and stuff that's generally taught in the law enforcement world, and began updating my training. And now I'm able to look back and see that the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of law enforcement training that I know is literally 10, 15, 20, 30 years behind the times. And that's part of the mission, is to get a hold of those cops and be able to bring more advanced or more up-to-date training or new ideas, something else, to those that are willing to listen to it. And really, it's not the cops on the street so much. It's oftentimes administrations, right? They're stuck in the dogma of what they did back in the police academy 20 years ago, whatever it may be. And so one of my deepest missions, because I love those people, right? And I want them to not experience what I did, and try to help with the update of stuff. There are a lot of great departments that are very progressive. They do fantastic, phenomenal training. I'm lucky to either be around those people, train with them, or oftentimes train them. And I'm so grateful. In fact, yesterday I was shooting with a SWAT dog down here, and just talk about salt of the earth. But not only that, some of the most skilled gun guy I've ever seen. And it's good to see those. And I just want to be part of the process of transforming that in the law enforcement world.
hmm And in the civilian, defensive training world, what do you think is the biggest gap that you see when you work with people? And then what do you do to try to fill that gap? Is it skills or is it something else?
I would say more it's the heart set. Um, Now, I know that's a different word than mindset, right? And usually in the gun world, we always talk about mindset. To me, it's really a heart set. Um, is is truly understanding the true depth of evil, the true depth of evil, right? Your bad guy who's here to kill you, rape you, steal you, do bad things to you or those you love, has a complete different moral compass, or a very lack of moral compass compared to the average common everyday Joe. And oftentimes we have that bias that we think that they have something of a moral compass compared to us. And if I could just somehow convince, or do try to convince people of the extreme depth of the evilness that's out there, right? That I saw day in, day out, and those that I love dearly still see to this day. I would love to do that, because I think if people realize the true evil that surrounds us oftentimes, I don't mean it terribly, but it is there. If we could do that, I think we'd wake up more people to the willingness to seek out honest training. And I think part of the problems with the gun world is we have bazillion guns sold every year in America. We have a gazillion guns out there, and God bless America, we should, right? But at the same time, my understanding, only about 1 or 2% of the people out there that actually own guns go off to formalized training. And I'm not talking your basic little concealed carry class or something you had to do based on some mandate of a state, but I'm talking realistic firearms training. And I think that is one of the worst problems of the gun world, is we need to somehow convince people that this high risk, high litigious thing that they're involved in, which is owning or carrying a gun in defense of life, that they need training in it, because we tend to fall back. At least I found this for me. You tend to fall back to your training. And I tell you, really, the worst day of your training instead of the best day of your training,
Hmm.
right? So therefore, if we can get better training into the hands of more people, we can create far less victims by doing so. The other thing that I see in there is we have a gazillion gun trainers out there who I think I would like to see be a bit more curious, a bit more open to seeing how they can change, adapt, grow, and modify. And it seems like in the gun world, everybody and their dog has a shingle up there saying they'll train people. Yet,
Hmm.
yet when you talk to the really in tune gun guys, you're oftentimes surprised how many they're like, yeah, maybe go here. So if we can increase both the skill level of not just the how to do things with defensive firearms or defensive tools, really, but also how to communicate a proper heart set to people, understanding the evil that's out there, but also how to deal with it, so you don't sit there surprised and shock of the moment. That you're dealing suddenly with evil you've never really deeply considered, so
Hmm.
you can deal with that more effectively and more efficiently, because time is a thing in a gunfight. And the more
Hmm.
you spend in shock, or just sitting there mentally going, no, 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 this could never happen to me, the more likely you are to put you in a body bag, or maybe somebody you love or somebody who doesn't deserve to be hit goes to a hospital or goes into a body bag. And the more we can get people to fight through that mentality, the heart set shock, because they've understood it from the outset before it happens to them, I think the more lives we could save.
Well, and that kind of ties into the next question I was going to ask you, is that, do you think that that in order to fight evil, does someone have to possess something in particular in order to do that? I mean, you say first we have to acknowledge that it even exists, that it could happen to me, right? I would argue that I think we need to study it. We need to study what they do, even though we might understand it, but that might help. And is it something that people possess? They either have it or they don't in order to save their own life? Or can it be trained into them? Or I know that's a really
So I think it
big
can be.
question.
I think it can be, if not trained into, it can be considered by people that are willing to consider it. Right? If you have the maturity of it, one of the beauties I found as as a trainer in the civilian world is I have so many people that now come because they're coming responsibly on their own. Right? Instead of dragging some soldier off to training, or
Mhm.
dragging some cop off to training that's like, really, dude, it's my day off. I don't want to do this. Right? So these are people who truly want to come. And if they're willing to come, oftentimes they're open mentally to learn about the true signs and dangers and the evilness of the human heart. That's wonderful, right? That's the people we want. I'm desperately wanting to talk to. If I could somehow get to the other people that they just don't really consider it, right? They
Hmm.
haven't figured out they could be the victim of the crime today. Their most
Hmm.
loved one could be today. That's something I don't know if we can get to unless they're looking for it. It's kind of like when the learner is ready, the teacher will appear type thing. I
Hmm.
don't know if we can, but for those who are open to it and thoughtful of it, I know it can be learned. It can be taught to them and they can see it. And though they may not have to truly understand it, as long as they know, hey, these are the type of things that do happen. And as long as they can understand, hey, there's bad people out there, they do evil things and they might do this, right? And the more disgustingly evil it is, I mean, you can't run from that and hide from that and be shocked by it. It's just accepted, hey, that's what happens. So, or that's what does happen. So therefore I will be my own defender. I will be the one willing to stand up for my own defense and really in the gap for the defense of others if need be. If so, God calls me to do that. And I'll do it joyfully and readily because I've prepared myself for it. Um, Ask the other part of your question. I think I've lost the first part.
Well, I was wondering, the question was, what would you say someone has to possess in order to beat evil? Um,
Oh, to be evil? Ooh.
yeah,
Well, I mean,
I think that ties in with your
in
heart
my
set that you.
mind, yeah, I mean, in my mind, I mean, there's just some people who just seem like they're born evil, right? They're just born ornery. We got a little boy here today that we're like, oh, he's ornery. Um, I think joking is, but I think some people are just that way. They're just something messed up in their soul before
No, I
they
don't
just
mean what do the evil people possess. I know that. I want to know, what do the good people need to possess in order to beat it, in order to fight evil, in order to beat evil. I think,
well, it takes. I think it takes a mindset. It also takes a heart set, right? A willingness to do it, a heart set, and that's a long conversation by itself.
yeah.
But also the knowledge, and I think this actually starts in the home, right? Without scaring kids, mom and dad should, I believe, should be willing to expose their children to some of the stuff that's out there, right? Moderation, understanding of that kid's mentality and psyche and emotional strength and everything else is a part of that message, but that's something that mom and dad honestly need to start doing within the home. People, just like you would teach your kids finance, or if you're interested or believe in any type of God, that you start teaching that in the home. Just like
Hmm.
arithmetic, you need to teach these things, and it starts within the home. But I wish too that our schools would talk about a little bit more. And I'm not a great expert on what's taught in American schools because I didn't grow up here. I was homeschooled in Africa, so I don't really know what's being taught in the schools. But I hear some schools do this, and I know the SROs, the school resource officers I knew, they tried to do this. They tried everything they got to do this. So I don't know what's really getting out to our schools, but I think it can be taught there. I think too that our churches need to talk about this, and just like you hear all the time in today's society that I hear it all the time that the two topics you got to avoid in family gatherings and parties and all that stuff is you don't talk about politics and religion. I don't agree with that personally. I think that within the home, within the family, within our friendships, everything else, you should be vigorously, respectfully, vigorously debating politics. You should be vigorously discussing, learning, talking about, almost arguing over religion, and learning from each other in a respectful way. In the same
Hmm.
way, we need to be doing the same thing within our own society, our own circles. That if we truly love our friends, that when they're open to the idea, to the messages, hey, have you thought about maybe not putting your garage door opener in that spot? Have you thought
Hmm.
about maybe taking your garage door opener at home, in the house at night if you park your car outside locked at night? All these little tiny tidbits that for those that are ultimately interested, that maybe we should start having that conversation more with our everyday friends who are not in the gun world. And if we can do that, you're going to find that 5 or 10% that actually want to know a little bit more. And then maybe again, it can be about less victims because they're willing to learn from us because we're willing to have those conversations.
Right, I talked about that in the last pod or the last live stream where we were talking about getting certain people out of your life, and I said, well, I don't want to get the critics out. I don't want to get the people out of my life that don't agree with what I believe
Yeah, I
in.
remember that.
Yeah, it's just that you don't want leeches in your life, energy sucking leeches is what I was talking about. So,
Yeah, and it's not ramming these messages down people's throats, right?
mhm.
Nobody likes the guy at the gym that's got to tell you how to do it, right?
Mhm.
Nobody's got to. Nobody likes the person who's got to push their politics on you all the time, or their religion, or their little gun guy, cool girl tips, right? We're not talking about
Yeah.
that, but just respectfully done, to where you can talk about it to others who are open up. And as I'm seeing, Mike is saying, if you've seen evil up close, and I just lost it. Yeah, if you've seen it up close, you know that it is almost immediately recognizable. So taking that type of concept for people like us who have dealt with it on a daily basis, literally day in, day out, every day for a decade or more, and being able to go, hey, look, my friends, here's some signs, here's some tips. Hey, kids, here's some signs, here's some tips. Hey,
Yeah.
guys, and I think that would be, I think that's part of the leadership of being in the gun community. And if you're a gun
Mhm.
owner, I'm sorry, you're a leader, within those that you are, I'd say, called by God to protect. So therefore, being able to give those messages to them is an important thing. I think I
Well, I
saw
have
Dylan or somebody say something respectful. Yeah, it's a
yeah.
respectful approach.
Yeah, and they also said be open to learning you're never always right.
Yeah.
That's a good life lesson right there. So one last, I guess, a semi-personal question, then I'll move on. Um, and that is, without getting too personal, can you explain to us how the aftermath of violence has changed you for better or worse? Because anybody that knows you or have taken any of your classes know that you've experienced this firsthand, and many of us haven't. But what for you has changed you for better or worse?
Well, I know in my classes, I don't, I started out doing it, but I don't anymore. I don't tell the war stories, unless it's literally to impact a point, to awaken the heart and the imagination so that they can visually see it and understand it better. So I tend not to get into that stuff because some of it's a bit brutal. Um, um, I would say if you're talking in the aftermath of violence, what has changed? You know what? I grew up in a wonderful home to probably the best parents this world has ever known. And they grew a kind, good, um, open, innocent young man. And I would say that through seeing the things that I've seen and done, um, I would say a lot of that is either diminished. I wouldn't say gone, but diminished. Um, I tend to be an extraordinarily suspicious person. And I don't mean that in a bad way, not about good people. Although you, man, I was suspicious the first time I saw you, Ninja. Crazy
Same,
chick,
same,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, same. But tend to be a bit more cautious and a bit more suspicious. Um, um, Constantly looking for the good in people, but somehow expecting the worst because that's all I saw day in, day out, right? Day in, day out. I'd say it made me a bit harder, a little bit more cynical. Um, um, I mean, I could go on. Um, it also awoke me to the fact that again, that we as in the defensive world, we could call it the gun world, but I think that's too limiting, because that limits it just to a tool. But we in the defensive world, um, we 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 are engaging in something that again, and especially today's litigious society of modern America, we're doing something that is high litigious or high risk in the civil criminal systems here, but we're also engaging in something that is high risk, owning and carrying a gun for the defense of life. Or, I mean, it could be carrying pepper spray, carrying a knife, whatever it is, defensive tools you carry. It's a high risk, high litigious thing. So it woke me up to the fact that, hey, by the sheer grace of God, have I survived to this point? Maybe some skill, maybe some luck, and a lot of just God's hand. That it woke me up to the need that even though I was technically a gun guy, that I really needed ongoing training. I needed diversity in training from a lot of experts, and I needed to put, more importantly, my own thought process into what I do, so that I don't just blindly take what somebody teaches me because they have a big name, but because it works for me, it makes sense on a common sense level, but always then being open to new. That was a change, being willing to do that instead of just accepting all higgly piggly the doctrine of whoever was teaching me because they were
Mhm.
somebody, some SWAT guy, some whatever.
Mhm.
Um, I think another thing it changed is I remember getting done with something. It was a horrific fight. A partner of mine was scarred, and to this day still has a hard time using his hands and all. And it was, I mean, just a horrific fight. I don't know how one or both of us survived this one. And I remember when it was over, as they picked us all up and carried us away, right? Because we didn't have the strength to do that. I just remember sitting there thinking how beautiful the world smelled. I remember the taste of the sand, and we were laying on the asphalt and on each other and all, and just the taste of that, how wonderful that tasted. There was a bird chirping over here, and then over here was a lot of heavy traffic because it was like 5 o'clock and heavy traffic going by, and just the sounds, that was some of the most beautiful sounds, music to my soul, and it just gave a vividness to life that I've experienced that before, but that one was so close that the vividness of life came in again, and it's something I always wanted to remember, and it brought a deep, I think, to me, a deep appreciation for the wonderfulness of life, and just the sheer desire to hang on to it, to not go too early, so that maybe I can leave a legacy with my incredible kids and my hot little wife, and just it just made you want to live to the fullest that's out there. I guess another thing would be that it made me again realize, or those times have made me again realize, the sheer mortality of we the human race. Right? It's extraordinarily hard to kill a human. Right? I've tried a couple of times on some people that just weren't going to die. Right? And I tried everything I got, and they just weren't going to do it. And it's amazing how resilient the human is. At the same time, I've also seen how extremely fragile the human life is, and how the tiniest, littlest thing that you would not think could hurt or damage or take somebody's life literally did, and did so quickly and so easily, that it made you realize, yeah, we're an extremely strong, tough thing. God made us. We're extremely tough and strong. We can take far more than people ever realize, even ourselves know. But at the same time, it's so fleeting and so easy to literally be a vapor in the wind and gone so quickly without a thought, that it made me realize how fragile we are, and how fragile life is, and how precious it is. And I guess it kind of awoken again each time that I went through something, the desire to not only live the best life that I can, but really the best life I can for my God, but also to continue it for those who I'd like to think still need me, right? Those two little sneaking kids, and my little, darling little wife, and then for those that I get to serve. So I think that's another thing, both the strength of human life, but also the frailty of it.
Wow, that's powerful. Very powerful. Well, we're actually almost through the hour, Adam, and I had a
What?
feeling that would happen. Yeah.
Okay. All
We're
right. Hold
we're
hold on. Hold on.
what, are you changing hats? You wear many
All
hats?
right, Casey. All right, Casey. This is for you. There you go, Casey. There you go. She doesn't
Okay, I
like my
don't know.
dirty hats, so there you go.
Oh, well, I think you just switched it for another dirty hat, Adam, didn't you? I used to get
Yeah,
made fun
probably.
of for my dirty hats, but the dirty hats are the
Uh,
comfortable ones. They're broke in, right?
I think Dylan, right? Dylan Wells, he needs to keep a tougher hand on that woman. She's love you, Casey.
So there are some questions here, guys, and if you guys have any questions, put those in the chat right now. We are going to go into the Q&A portion of the show. The first question, I can't tell who it's from. Thoughts on pistol caliber, carbines, PDW range toys are useful for self-defense. Are you coming back to Montana? So it must be a Montanan asking the questions.
So yeah, right now it's slated to go back to Montana. I gotta confirm it with my wife. We just haven't been able to finish the conversation, but right now it's slated to come back. I think it's like April sometime, maybe April, early May, last March, I can't remember. And we'll be up there for about 10 days. And in that process, some of that training is literally going to be a very specific group. It's the same stuff I would teach to, say, a SWAT team or special operations unit. So that's for very select people, but there's going to be multiple classes on the side that'll go back to Montana. So that's coming up. Thoughts on pistol caliber carbines? I think they're fantastic. I don't have a lot of experience on them. My SWAT team was using the H&Ks, the MP5s, before I got there, but right before I got to it, they switched over to the 5.56. So in the military, we always ran 5.56. When I got to the SWAT team, the police world, we were running 5.56. So I've never spent a lot of time on PCCs or pistol caliber carbines. I want to learn that. In fact, I'm getting ready, hopefully, to learn from a girl down here. Gunshine is her name, but I'm hoping to learn from her. She's one of the top PCC shooters out there, and she's offered to train me. I just got to find me one, so I don't have one yet. But I think they're extremely useful for the defensive life, especially within the home. Defensively, I think they're great because you have multiple contacts on the gun. It's a lot easier to use than maybe just a handgun. And I'd say probably the other better thing, if you're looking for a defensive tool, is probably a really good shotgun, especially for home defense and all. But if I'm answering your question right, I think that's a great tool to have. There's a lot of other tools out there, and what I think too much we have done in the gun world is we have focused too much on the gun, and the gun's not the point. You're the point, right? You are the weapon, and you've got to develop that mental mindset. And you could do it with anything, right? Pick up a big old hunk of rock, but if you learn that mental mindset and don't always just spend it on the gun, that's an important thing. Another thing I'd add: get medical training. Right, you're more likely to use good medical training. We do that. A lot of good people do that. They get good defensive, or I'd say trauma or tactical medical training.
Okay. Along those same lines, Laura wants to know, I've realized we need to learn more than how to run our gun. Does Defenders USA offer pepper spray or defense for when you can't get to your gun or spray? So non-gun classes.
Yeah, we do. Now, understand, I don't have any civilian certifications and that type of thing. I meant to do some stuff with Chuck Haggard. I forget what his company is named, but Chuck Haggard, he's fantastic. And there's a lot of other people in that area. I think John Correa, Neil Widener. There's a whole bunch of people that are certified to do that. At the same time, I spent a lot of time with pepper spray in both the military and the police world. I help teach that stuff. I know how to use the stuff like crazy. I do teach that stuff, but I don't have actual certifications. That's one thing I need to run off and do. So, but I do think that it's a really good thing to have. I'm a massive fan of the POMs, POM, massive fan of those out there. There's sabers that are really good too. But I think that's a really good defensive tool. I'm also a fan of, I don't like it as much, but I'm a fan of a knife if you need to use it. So you had Adam Boyce on here of Spartan Mode. I think some of his training from a defensive aspect would be fantastic. So I think the gun world, we need to migrate somewhat away from the gun, not much, but a little bit, so we can develop ourselves as the more important tool user. And just all those things are tools. And I'd rather train this and this, right? Any monkey can learn to shoot, usually not well. But if I can get a hold of them, or somebody good trainer can get a hold of them, we can train the thing, whether it's the gun, the rifle, the shotgun, the knife, the pepper spray. It can be trained into. I think those are fantastic, excellent tools.
Yeah, and I think Adam Boyce has a class coming up in December. In Idaho.
Yeah, I've become a true fan of that guy. Guys, look up Spartan Mode. Adam Boyce.
Spartan Mode,
Spartan Mode, just incredible trainer. In fact, he's got a live here, so you can go back a couple weeks and you can see him on here.
Mike wants to know, it says, leaving a guaranteed paycheck and pension as an LEO takes guts. How hard was it to make that leap, and how much of it was God kicking you in the head?
So, Mike, most things in life is God kicking me in the head. Most things. And granted, too, I was only 10 years in. And in Colorado, we don't have a 20-year pension, right? At least the department I was at. They don't have that. And in fact, I knew a guy who had been there 26 years, and in one fell swoop, he lost over half of his pension, right? And ended up having to work years and years later until he finally almost died in the job. So, I mean, it's a different thing there. The other, so that it was not an easy thing. It was a hard thing to give up. At the same time, I got to tell you, the immediate relief. Oh, the relief, especially not dealing with administration. Oh my goodness. It's a terrible thing when you're more afraid to go to your police department during the weekday. You're more afraid or dreading to go there than you are to go see Mr. Dirtbag who wants to kill you. Oh, that gets so old. But that was tough. But I think the Lord kind of just said, "Look, son, here you go." And I'm now grateful, but that was a hard thing.
I've heard sometimes that God will nudge you and nudge you and nudge you. If you don't listen, then he'll do something, whatever it takes to get your attention. So it sounds like
So
that's what he
so
did to you.
so funny story. About 6 or 8 months before I finally did leave, maybe a year. I literally was praying, and God literally said, "You need to get out of law enforcement. If you don't get out, I'm going to find a way for you to get out." And I'm like, "Huh?" I'm like, "No." And slowly but surely, I started seeing the writing on the wall, and I'm like, "Oh." And this was, probably a year before. I'm like, "Oh, okay, all right, time to listen." 2 by 4 from the head to, to the head from God. It seems like what He's done all my life. When you're hard headed and don't listen.
A couple more questions here, and then we'll be wrapping up.
Okay.
Chris Brady wants to know. I think a lot of people
Ah.
want to know this. Has Adam considered taking vitamins and being healthier? He's always sick. Maybe get more sleep.
So yeah, I should. Part of the problem is I grew up in Africa, right? I had malaria, I think 23 different times, had it all the time, it seemed like, and it's really damaged my system. So I tend to get sick easily. So yeah, that should be something. And sleep. I mean, I'm a small business owner, Chris. What is sleep? So yeah, probably. Whatever. By the way,
Uh,
Chris is here, so we need to get together.
and then let's see. They want to know about the book in the background. Kita's book.
Oh,
Is it worth the read?
I don't know. So I just started this. I actually just met her at the A Girl and a Gun conference this year. She was teaching a class, and I just something about her just seemed like I got curious. So I started talking to her about what she did, and she goes, "Well, I wrote the book," and I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "No, I literally wrote the book." So I got the book from her. I bought the book right there on the spot from her, and I keep saying I'm gonna read, and I haven't. So I just started it a couple days ago. I'm a couple pages in. I already like it. I'm considering going to one of her classes if I can talk my wife into it. That's coming up in Texas in January. I don't know if I'll be able to, both time wise and some other things, but I just started it and I thought, you know what, I like what I see so far, so I threw it up back here so other people could see it. I also am hoping to get a hold of her to talk her into coming on this live. I know you've not met her, but I'll tell you, like everybody else that's come on here, highly impressive, and I think we can learn a lot from her from what I've seen.
I probably do better interviewing people I don't know than people I do, honestly. Let's see. Let's see. Ever consider hosting, or could you recommend a class dedicated to situational awareness, like for overseas travel, keeping an eye out for pickpockets, security threats, etc.?
Yeah, so I run multiple situational awareness classes at the same time. If we're going to be talking overseas and a lot of travel stuff, I'd highly recommend you look into a guy named Greg Ellifritz of active response training. Greg Ellifritz. He's literally wrote the book on situational awareness and safety in travel. Literally, just fantastic. In fact, Neil Widener, Ross Hicks, John Correa, Young, I forget his last name, and I just took a class with him 2 weeks ago. And it's the first time I had ever actually met Greg in person, and I was highly impressed. But when it comes to travel, he is the man. So look him up, Greg Ellifritz, active response training. Buy his book. Buy his book. In fact, my wife and I are going to be getting the book. But get his book, read his book, and then anything that comes to situation awareness he does, go do it. There's a lot of other great trainers out here that do that type of stuff too. We do as well, and I think it's a pretty good class.
Awesome. Well, we're not out of questions, but we are out of time. So
Oh wow, that went fast. Wow.
that went really fast. I didn't get to all the questions, but I got to most of them. So I appreciate your time, Adam, and for being such a good sport, because that was kind of I don't know that you really saw that coming, and you were a good sport about it. So I appreciate it. But you know what? Guys, it needed to be done, did it not? It needed to be done because we've been doing this since July, and all of a sudden it hit me. Why have we not interviewed Adam?
Well,
It's
there's
one of
so many
those.
incredible people out there to interview, right? There's
Did you
so many
say credible or
incredible
incredible?
people
Oh, okay.
incredible people to interview. And
Yeah.
I mean, am I compared to a lot of them? And I want to get those people on. If we can just spread the messages, whatever it is, whoever it comes from, that are needed for others, that's the whole
Yeah.
purpose behind this. And I got to tell you, I'm in awe of what you do. I'm a fangirl. and you're doing really good. And thank you to the audience.
I'm doing the best I can. We appreciate your time tonight, Adam. So now you can go back to behind the scenes and help me out there. That would be great.
All
But
right.
you were wonderful. Thanks for your time tonight. All right, guys. So we're going to wrap up for tonight and tomorrow, or not tomorrow, next week. I'm excited to bring on Amy Langdon from Langdon Tactical. Amy is passionate about fitness and has 3 CrossFit training certifications. She's also a tactical games athlete. So I'm really excited to have her on next week. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about health and fitness. And I think that will be an exciting broadcast. She has her husband as well is an instructor, and they are in charge of, or the founders of, Langdon Tactical. So that's going to be a really good interview next week. So make sure you tune in for that, and feel free to get in touch, reply to the emails that I send you. If you're not on the email notification list, you can go to jnltraining.com, sign up for email notifications so you know what's going on, what's up to speed, and you can reply to me there. Also, go to the Defenders Life Facebook group as well for all up-to-date information. And we will see you next week. Until then, take care.